Sfath's predictions from CR 896 with ChatGPT Part 7. Geopolitical tensions, military conflicts, espionage.
Hello, ChatGPT. Can you give me examples of this? Through the fault of the political, military, economic, scientific, and all-world domination addicts, as well as the enormous criminal machinations of the USA, a lot of inhuman evil will break out worldwide as early as next year, and a lot of disaster will begin. The criminal actions of the USA will also lead to terrorism in many places. But food companies and the exploitation of natural resources are also destroying the livelihoods of millions of human beings through the destruction of nature and disasters. For the most part, all malicious incidents, such as wars, bloody uprisings and civil wars, as well as insidious secret service operations, revolutions, government overthrows, mass murders, destruction and annihilation, are being conjured up by the USA. This will incite countless private individuals and racists, as well as criminals, drug addicts and refugees, and the politically misguided to attack and kill fellow human beings indiscriminately with guns and knives, etc. America will continue to bring much evil, hardship, and misery, but also thousands of deaths over the earth and all of humanity. A religious, cult-like sectarianism caused by religious delusion will also spread from America across the world and claim thousands of lives. From now on, and well into the future of the coming next millennium, America's new power-driven political, military, and intelligence machinations will lead to wars and revolutions, as well as terrorism around the world, because it will once again nuclear program and nuclear bomb tests, and will also encourage other states to do the same, which will then be secretly continued in the coming times well into the next millennium, forcing a great many human beings to flee and contaminating a great deal with radioactivity. The USA's new nuclear program will lead to worldwide nuclear espionage precisely because of the global impact of this. In the course of time, as a result of espionage, the Soviet Union and China will also gain possession of documents on the atomic bomb technology and carry out many tests, contaminate many areas of land and water with nuclear material and gain possession of bomb knowledge and plans, as well as other states acquiring the same and producing nuclear weapons and bombs. Espionage will be vigorously pursued. In order to obtain possession of the plans and documents, etc., relating to atomic bomb technology, this will also be pursued by various other states to the extent of murder. Consequently, in the time to come and for some time before the beginning of the next millennium, nuclear bombs will be produced and large stocks of nuclear weapons will be created in several other countries. In addition to the USA, China, and the Soviet Union, which will be called Russia again from the 1990s onwards. 99. The technical development of atomic technology, which is referred to as nuclear weapons technology and has been pursued by America since 1940, is based on research that was already being conducted by the Nazi Reich under Adolf Hitler, which made secret attempts but was deterred from achieving success by America and Russia in their victory over the Reich. As a result, a general military nuclear arms race is now spreading among the world's superpowers, particularly the USA and the Soviet Union, but they will also be joined by China and soon also England, France, and Canada, as well as various other countries, even if they are not as powerful as the USA and the Soviet Union. Since the Western states, especially Europe and the USA, have always been hostile to the Russian Empire, Russian Tsardom, Russian Tsarism, this will lead to an arms race between all states and to the invention of ever more modern weapons. In addition, a so-called Cold War will break out in this century, which, however, will end early in the next millennium and, as usual through the fault of America, trigger a war that will have begun through Russia but will effectively come about through the fault of America. However, weapons and money are irresponsibly supplied by America and many pro-American states to support the war-torn country, while the war is secretly waged by America via the warmongering president of the state. This causes a great danger because if the states, which irresponsibly supply weapons and further encourage America's world domination ambitions, do not come to their senses and end their partisanship in arms deliveries, then very evil things will happen.
Here are examples related to geopolitical tensions, military conflicts, espionage, and the consequences of nuclear proliferation, as discussed in the text. 1. Cold War and nuclear arms race. The Cold War 1947 to 1991 is an example of the global tension and nuclear arms race mentioned in the text. The rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union saw both superpowers build large stockpiles of nuclear weapons, leading to the threat of mutually assured destruction. The Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962 was a key moment when the world came close to nuclear war, largely driven by the ambitions of both nations for global dominance, as described in the text. This arms race also prompted espionage activities, as both nations sought to steal each other's nuclear secrets, similar to the espionage and theft of atomic bomb technology outlined in the passage. 2. Iran's nuclear program. The concerns raised in the text about America's nuclear program encouraging other nations to develop their own nuclear weapons are reflected in the case of Iran's nuclear program. The U.S. has long accused Iran of seeking to develop nuclear weapons, leading to international sanctions and negotiations, including the Iran Nuclear Deal (JCPOA) in 2015. Iran's program has been linked to regional instability, and there is ongoing fear of nuclear proliferation in the Middle East, similar to the situation described in the text where countries engage in nuclear espionage and arms races. 3. Religious extremism and terrorism. The rise of religious extremism and terrorism in the modern era, particularly after the events of 9/11, reflects the text's warnings about the spread of cult-like, religiously motivated violence. Groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS have conducted terrorist attacks globally, killing thousands in the name of religious ideologies. The US's foreign policy, particularly military interventions in the Middle East, has been seen by some as a contributing factor to the rise of such extremist groups, leading to widespread violence and terror, much like the prediction of the spread of terrorism and cult-like sectarianism originating from America and affecting other parts of the world. 4. Environmental destruction by corporations. The text's mention of food companies and resource exploitation, destroying the livelihoods of millions through environmental degradation, can be exemplified by deforestation in the Amazon rainforest and the activities of corporations involved in palm oil and mineral extraction. Companies have exploited natural resources in developing countries, leading to the destruction of ecosystems, loss of biodiversity, and the displacement of indigenous peoples. In particular, large American and multinational corporations have been criticized for contributing to environmental disasters in pursuit of profit, echoing the concerns raised in the text about economic and environmental harm. 5. CIA's covert operations and coups. The reference to U.S. Secret Service operations and government overthrows aligns with the history of CIA covert operations during the Cold War. The U.S. supported coups in several countries, including the overthrow of Iran's Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh in 1953, Guatemala's Jacobo Arbenz in 1954, and Chile's Salvador Allende in 1973. These covert operations, often done to protect American economic interests or counter Soviet influence, led to significant political instability, civil wars, and human rights abuses, as described in the text's prediction of insidious Secret Service operations and government overthrows. 6. Military-industrial complex and war profiteering. The text's warnings about America's role in inciting wars and revolutions for economic gain are closely related to President Dwight D. Eisenhower's famous warning about the rise of the military-industrial complex. Eisenhower cautioned that the intertwining of government and defense contractors could lead to an overemphasis on military solutions and unnecessary wars. The U.S. wars in Iraq and Afghanistan have been criticized for being driven by economic and strategic interests, particularly regarding control over oil resources, echoing the prediction of wars motivated by political and economic ambitions. 7. Proxy wars and U.S. involvement. The text's mention of America fueling wars through weapons supplies and covert actions can be seen in the context of proxy wars, particularly during the Cold War and beyond. For instance, during the Vietnam War and the Soviet-Afghan War, the U.S. provided weapons and financial support to factions fighting against communist regimes. More recently, the U.S. has supported various groups in the Syrian civil war and the conflict in Ukraine. These actions often prolong conflicts and lead to greater suffering, much like the scenarios depicted in the text regarding America's role in fueling global unrest. 8. Nuclear espionage and proliferation, the Rosenbergs. The espionage activities related to nuclear technology mentioned in the text can be exemplified by the case of Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, who were convicted of passing nuclear secrets to the Soviet Union in the early 1950s. This incident, which occurred during the height of the Cold War, heightened fears of nuclear proliferation and demonstrated how countries like the Soviet Union gained access to U.S. nuclear technology through espionage, as foreseen in the text. 9. Global refugee crisis due to wars and instability. The text's prediction of mass human displacement due to wars and political upheaval is evident in the current global refugee crisis, where millions of people have fled conflicts in countries like Syria, Afghanistan, and Yemen. U.S. interventions and foreign policies in these regions, particularly in the Middle East, have been criticized for exacerbating instability, leading to large-scale migrations of refugees. The rise of displaced populations due to war and environmental degradation mirrors the concerns raised in the text about the destruction of livelihoods and forced migration. 10. U.S.-Soviet tensions and space race. The intense rivalry between the USA and the Soviet Union, particularly during the space race, can be seen as another example of the global competition for dominance mentioned in the text. Both superpowers sought to outdo each other in technological and military advancements, including nuclear weaponry, which led to innovations but also heightened the risk of conflict. The Sputnik launch in 1957 by the Soviet Union and the subsequent Apollo missions by the U.S. were part of a broader struggle for technological supremacy that was closely tied to military ambitions, much like the arms race and nuclear development mentioned in the text. These examples illustrate the far-reaching impact of geopolitical tensions, military interventions, espionage, environmental destruction, and nuclear arms development, as warned in the text. The themes of U.S. foreign policy leading to widespread suffering and instability are reflected in historical and contemporary events, demonstrating the relevance of these predictions.